Hello. Today we're going to be talking about the psychological experiment. So, the psychological experiment allows psychologists to carefully control conditions and bring cause and effect relationships into sharp focus. So, independent variable is the variable that is altered or varied by the researcher, while the dependent variable measures the results of the experiment. It reveals the effects that the independent variable had. And we attempt to observe the influence of the independent variable on the dependent variable. And think about the relationship of the independent and dependent variables as about the relationship between a mom and a child. So the mother decides what the child will do. She's independent. While the child who is dependent on the mother is going to portray the behavior depending on what the mom instructs or decides to do. There are other important components of the psychological experiment, and it's the types of group that there are in an experiment. So the experimental group consists of participants who exposed to the independent variable, while the control group consists of participants who were not exposed to the independent variable. It is important to have a control group in order to make sure that the changes you saw, that the effects you saw on the dependent variable are actually due to the manipulation you made in the independent variable. So the control group consists of people who were not exposed to the independent variable. And if you see a difference between, given that everything else is the same, if you see a difference between the experimental group scores and the control group scores, you can attribute that difference to the independent variable. So if your independent variable is watching violent media show, what would the experimental group and the control group experience? The experimental group will be exposed to the violent media show, while the control group will not be exposed to that video, to that crime media show. And every psychological experiment starts with a research question. So, for example, does the use of cell phone while driving influence driving ability? Your independent variable is cell phone use, while your dependent variable is the driving ability. And you have two conditions. Condition 1 is driving with a cell phone, so that's your experimental condition, experimental group, while condition 2 is driving without a cell phone. That's your control group. The results of the study, according to the information provided in your textbook, is that all drivers talking on cell phones drive no better than people who are legally drunk. And those who text while driving drive even worse than people who are legally drunk. Conclusion: please don't text and drive. Another example, your research question is, does listening to music improve learning ability? Your independent variable is music, and your dependent variable is learning abilities. So condition 1 would be listening to music while learning, so that's your experimental group, while condition 2 is not listening to music while learning. That's your control group. A very additional important component to conducting research in psychology is having a random assignment. Random assignment is when a participant has equal chance of being in either the experimental group or the control group. And why is random assignment important? Well, for example, if you take all the morning people and put them in one condition, in the experimental group, and take all the not morning people, the evening people, in the control group, if you see difference in your results in the scores of, for example, the learning abilities, it might not be because of your independent variable that you manipulated, not because of whether they studied with music or without, but it might be because of the differences, their personal differences. So some of them are morning people and the other group are the evening people. Therefore, it's very important to have random assignment, is to make sure that if you do have differences between the experimental and the control group, these differences are actually due to the independent variable. Correlation is not causation. Correlation is the existence of consistent, systematic relationship between two events, measures, or variables, while causation is the act of causing some effect. So the following statement has a loophole. I've been taking vitamin C tablets and I haven't had a cold all year. Vitamin C is great. What is the loophole? Well, there is a relationship, a correlation between taking vitamin C tablets and not having a cold. But we don't know that it is actually the process of taking vitamin C tablet that causes us not to have a cold. It might be that we were just not exposed to any viruses that year, or we have been extra washing our hands, or not interacting with people who have colds. It can be a million other reasons. So according to this statement, there is a correlation between taking vitamin C tablets and not having a cold. But we are not sure if it's actually a causal relationship. And there can be a positive and negative correlations. So a positive correlation when both of the variables increase or decrease in a similar manner. So, for example, the more you study, the higher your grades will be. So the higher number of hours you read for a class, the higher your grade in the class would be. Similarly, the less hours you read and prep for a class, lower your grade would be. This is also a positive correlation because both of the variables decrease in a similar manner. A negative correlation is when one of the variables increases while the other decreases and vice versa. So the more hours you spend playing video games, the lower your grade will be. In thinking about causality, a causal relationship, it's always important to consider additional variables. So consider the following statement. Consumption of ice cream leads to higher crime rates. Your independent variable is the consumption of ice cream, and the dependent variable is the rate of crime. Is there a causal relationship between these two variables? What can be the alternative explanation if there isn't a causal relationship between these two variables? Heat, perhaps? People consume more ice cream when it's hot. They're also more outside and more likely to get frustrated and quicker to aggress, possibly because of the heat. And the big picture, when looking about on the research process, there are several components. So there is a research question, there is the hypothesis, and the hypothesis is a proposed explanation for a phenomenon. So, for example, your research question is, talking on cell phone influence driving ability. You can have two hypotheses, for example. You can say individuals talking on cell phone will be worse drivers than individuals not talking on cell phone. Alternatively, you can predict that individuals talking on cell phone will be better drivers than individuals not talking on the cell phone. So hypothesis is pretty much your prediction. What do you predict your results to be? You need to, of course, identify your independent variable and your dependent variable. You need to identify your methods. So while conducting the research, how many participants are you going to have? What are the characteristics of the participants? How many men, how many women do you have? Does their ethnicity or sexual orientation or relationship status matters? Is it something you should consider in your research process? What type of surveys or questionnaires did the participants complete? Another component of the research process is obviously the results of your study. And it's always important to consider the flaws and weaknesses of your study. So for example, researchers didn't use random assignment. That could have influenced the results they got. Researchers exhibited research bias, which is changes in participants' behavior caused by the unintended influence of a researcher's actions. Researchers drawing causal relationship between two variables when a third variable can explain this relationship. And researchers drawing causal relationship between two variables when there is only a correlational relationship between the two. That's all I have for you now. Be sure to complete the quiz and post on the discussion board. Remember, you need to post your answers to the questions as well as comment on 2 of your classmates' comments.